I think it's very fair to say that the Build Back Better agenda definitely had better days and definitely isn't what they promised it to be. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Rudowski here of WeAreChange.org, and we have a lot of important information, especially when it comes to the latest troubling developments in Ukraine right now, as of course there are some major troop movements and foreign policy developments that we of course will be talking about on this broadcast, as well as the larger civil unrest hitting a lot of places in the world that still want to live by a fairy tale, as in Brussels. The situation there got extremely tense between protesters and police officers, where literally riot police officers had to deploy water cannons. Meanwhile, in other places in the world like Ireland, the government there is joining many other governments like it, like England and the Czech Republic and many others to come, and literally dropping all restrictions, mandates, lockdowns, and government interventions into people's personal lives when it comes to fighting sickness. Now, as the official agenda is being uncovered, as the dam starts breaking, I think it's definitely fair to say that it's going to leave a lot of people asking some very serious questions to people in authority, and this could be why some authoritarians are trying to still stick to the official narrative as much as they can, as Dr. Fauci keeps parading himself on the corporate media, declaring that this will not end anytime soon, and that we need more procedures, more intervention, more government when it comes to dealing with this sickness, a proposal which many people find absolutely obscure, disingenuous, as even major leftist figures like Bill Maher came out publicly against Dr. Fauci, specifically saying, don't sit there in your white coat and tell me, just do what we say, specifically answering back to Dr. Fauci with his larger demands from the American public. And even though this should have been the response from the very beginning, it's at least good to see some major media figures finally saying enough is enough, answering back, and standing up for their own personal freedoms and liberties, as of course Bill Maher also hosts other leftist figures like Barry Weiss that also made very similar arguments, saying that we're just done here, we're not going to go along with this larger game against the people. And in some places they have to protest this, just like in Brussels, the clip that we played in the beginning of this video. This was the huge crowds that gathered. This is Sweden, as the people there are fighting a domestic passport system, and even though Sweden from the very beginning originally had the right approach here, they are definitely trying to implement a very draconian, intrusive measure into everyone's lives, which of course, as you could see, the general public by and large is against. The German government is also officially concerned with the massive amounts of people that have been coming out in their country, as of course there's also a major trucker boycott happening right now in Canada that is absolutely massive, which of course also has a lot of popular support by the people living in that country. This still photo is from Croatia, where the people there have just had enough signers to start the Enough is Enough initiative, which is a referendum on the abolition of all these draconian laws. And even here in Washington, D.C., we had a major rally with thousands of people coming out to it, which I personally covered. Yesterday's video was my coverage from that event. And today, later on, we will be releasing special interviews with speakers at this event on LukeUncensored.com, our own platform where we get to say and do what we want. Your participation in this helps fund our work, our effort, and is helping create infrastructure that will literally be able to express whatever ideas we want. If you haven't signed up yet on LukeUncensored.com, what are you waiting for? You not only get exclusive, drastically reduced price of merchandise, 3 master classes about survival, online journalism, traveling, expatting. You not only get almost content given to you every single day, but you also help fund this independent media organization. If you haven't signed up yet, what are you waiting for? And also don't forget to check out our t-shirt store, where we just released our latest t-shirt, specifically our anti-Faucism shirts, which are now available exclusively on thebestpoliticalshirts.com. Check out the links down in the description below and click on them right now. Now, some people are theorizing with the end of this sickness and restrictions on many places in the world that this establishment, this administration, needs another controversy and tragedy to exploit to make people forget about what just happened, to make people not seek accountability by shocking them into a potential conflict in Ukraine, where, of course, the Biden administration is heavily involved in. The president's son also has a lot of very interesting business ties to Ukraine and their national energy company. There's a lot of clear allegations of corruption with this Biden administration. And now the world is in a very tense standoff between the United States and Russia when it comes to this country, where NATO just announced that they're sending more ships, more jets, and other military hardware as, of course, a potential counter effort against Russia and their possible incursion of Ukraine. Now, I say incursion because that's what the president of the United States previously called it if it would happen, and according to many media critics, has almost invited the Russians to invade Ukraine with, of course, his bewildering statements on this situation. But right now, with NATO sending in more military hardware, the situation is, of course, getting very serious and very drastic. As, of course, the United States, even though they are part of NATO, even though their forces are the ones that are getting closer to this situation, even on top of that, additionally, the United States is discussing more military deployments near Ukraine, and with no diplomatic breakthroughs in sight and hundreds of thousands of troops near each other, with now even Belarus responding with their own military deployment, it's definitely fair to say that the world is on edge here, and rightfully so. This is a very complicated geopolitical situation that has no end in sight and has continued with other proxy conflicts all around the world, as of course there was already a proxy conflict in Syria, in Yemen, where the East and the West directly clashed. It's also important to note that many times when it comes to even diplomatic spats, that usually the East, which represents the larger ideas of Russia and China, have been pushed to align with each other against the West, which is the United States and Western Europe, with other diplomatic issues in countries like Iran and Libya that, of course, have seen the West and East at odds with each other. As, of course, I think it's very fair to say that these two forces do not share the same interests and have their own goals. Now, according to the Financial Times, Russia is planning to target Ukraine's capital in a, quote, lightning war. This, of course, is the side of the story told to you by, of course, the Americans. The Russians have their own side of the story that they're telling the Russians, as Russia just announced that they're going to be deploying more military hardware at the same time that NATO is deploying theirs. We're also hearing reports that the Russian Navy warships are embarking on, quote, long-distance missions, and Putin is even, according to some sources, trying to work out a strategic partnership with Cuba, which, of course, is very close to the United States. Now, I think it's fair to say that we don't need to take Boris Johnson's words for it, but, of course, an invasion, a conflict in this region would be disastrous, not just towards Russia, but also the United States, which could potentially face a two-frontal conflict, as of course if a battle unfolds in Ukraine, as of course simultaneously, strategically, this would be the opportunity for China to of course invade Taiwan and put the United States in a very difficult situation. Now the situation is getting very tense right now, to the point where many countries are pulling out their diplomats out of Ukraine, and of course any conflict, any life lost is a tragedy, and we should try to avoid it at all costs, and we should strategically, diplomatically, of course, try to resolve this conflict. Will that happen? Most likely not, because a lot of governments are ruled by sociopaths. But if we did want to ease tensions, we first have to understand what the other side wants, and when it comes to this specific complicated situation, Russia has always asserted that it wants a guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO. All they want is a promise. Russia, of course, also wants militaries, specifically NATO and the U.S. militaries, to stop amassing on their border. And those are the situations and terms being negotiated right now between the United States and Russia. Now, what exactly will happen here? I think there's a strong possibility for a limited conflict, a doctrine proposed by Henry Kissinger that, of course, will create another situation that's very awfully similar to the situation that unfolded in Syria. Syria Syria, a conflict that didn't need to happen, but obviously escalated after many intelligence agencies and special interests got involved, started pushing for a revolution, which ended in a civil conflict, which is almost the same identical story of exactly what happened in Ukraine, where special interests and intelligence agencies were pushing for a revolution. They got it, and now we're very close to a civil war with that country even still being segregated from itself based off tribal identities. Now, with Belarus being on the side of Russia, Poland, of course, being on the side of the United States and NATO, both, of course, closely in the proximity of this entire situation, it absolutely strikes like a recipe for disaster, and I think we should try to avoid disaster at all costs. That's just my perspective. I hope there is no conflict here, but with the situation unfolding, I think there's a strong chance there might be. And plus, what better to, of course, help the dire poll numbers of the current president? And what else could stop the larger backlash coming against the establishment and their clear failures here? When you start thinking about it that way, things start to make a lot of sense. That's my particular take on it. If you think I'm wrong in any way, shape, or form, or if you think I said something that was incorrect, let me know down in the comment section below what you thought that was. I always appreciate your constructive criticism. I always appreciate just your time being here, spending it with me. It means the world to me, especially when you share these videos, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And this is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org.